My petition to the court is only to ask the government and the Reserve Bank to frame a policy, a national policy, for such idle wealth being kept in different parts of India. Tirupati has a huge lot. In a way that it will be safe, but also will become a source of income for the temple and a source of funds for national development. Can we not increase our income by 5 lakhs through QCBs, quasi-currency bonds, and use that money in core sector projects to build up employment opportunities quickly? We have around 25,000 to 30,000 tons of gold in the country, in the hands of course, RBI, 687 tons, different old families, royal families, private citizens, of which only about 1,500 tons are now in this active economic stream through gold loans with banks or NBFCs. The rest is practically idle. My dear friends, this idea came up of quasi-currency bonds came up during 2011 when the matter of the Padmanabha Swamy treasures were brought before the Supreme Court. There is very much a danger of the decision going in favor of the elected government, and then year after year different people will come to power who may not be committed to the protection of that wealth, and it can be misused. There can be a lot of law and order issues also. So I thought of a way to preserve that wealth, at the same time bring its value into the national economy and give a return to the temple. The temple, according to my plans, will get an annual income of around 3,000 crores, which it can use for the maintenance of its facilities, its buildings, give us grants to other smaller temples which do not have the resources to keep themselves in good repair, run social institutions like feeding the poor, taking care of widows, all that. So a case is filed, filed a petition in the Supreme Court. It was admitted in 2011. Now it is one of the two, I'm glad to say it's one of the two main issues that are taken up by the Supreme Court for final decision. The other being the question of who is the ruler. I've been working on this idea for about 7-8 years now, trying to get the Ministry of Finance, RBI, political leaders, everybody interested. Everybody said the idea is good. In fact, when I talked to the Central Minister directly in charge of the topic, he said, it is good, but who will bell the cat? That is his answer. It is good. Everybody is afraid to touch the topic because it's very sensitive. Anyway, the Supreme Court will take its course, let its decision come. My petition to the court is only to ask the government and the Reserve Bank to frame a policy, a national policy, for such idle wealth being kept in different parts of India. Tirupati has a huge lot. In a way that it will be safe, but also will become a source of income for the temple and a source of funds for national development. Subsequently, the idea has evolved into a plan for the government to raise funds through the annual budgets instead of deficit financing, which has its costs and risks. Some of my friends organized a workshop in Trivandrum in May 2018, and my presentation to them lasted about 45 minutes, but the question and answer session went on for 2 hours and 15 minutes. It was a small gathering. There's a former ambassador, former High Court judge, and all very educated people. One question asked was this: why cannot the government do it on its own? So that idea was developed, and I've just come to the suggestion for the government to introduce quasi-currency bonds to finance its budget deficits. I'll take you through it step by step. I must thank Srijan Foundation. I must acknowledge the immense support and inputs of Honorable Justice K. Sukumaran, who represented me in the High Court, in the Supreme Court, and Satish Dutt, Dr. Chandramohan, and other classmates. They organized the workshop. Ambassador Srinivasan and the CMA Nair of KFC and the Indian Society of Authors, they all supported it. Now, we have a very peculiar situation in the economy. We have a very good growth rate. Compared to the other countries, 5% is not bad. Yet, considering that we have a lot of catching up to do with developed countries, we need to grow at greater than 5%, 8% or even 10%, we should target. At the same time, GDP growth rate is not an absolute indicator of economic well-being. Those real indicators are unemployment rate, per capita availability of food for the lowest quarter of the people. In that, we are now stagnating or perhaps even slightly growing back. Unemployment rate is rising. And consequently, a lot of the most economically disadvantaged people are suffering deprivations in food even. Roti, kapda, makan, patai. Let us add one more word to roti, kapda, makan. Patai also is important. In all this, people are struggling. Family debt burden is increasing. We need to reduce unemployment. We need to invest in infrastructure projects massively. To do that quickly, for that we need to boost revenue, then regain GDP growth rate. My proposition is a quick and easy way to satisfy all three. As we have said before, just the projects that we need to undertake to generate employment and generate revenue, the funds have to be, they have to be funded by government allocation or massive inflow from private sector, domestic and external, both as debt and as equity. Government allocation, as we know, is insufficient. Last year's budget has, or rather current year's budget has a deficit of around 7 lakh crores, which is met by market borrowings. Now, altering terms to improve private sector inflows from overseas is risky in the long run. There are political costs to pay, there are financial costs to pay. Ultimately, it can be very dangerous. These are rough numbers for the 1920 budget. Revenue income is 16.5, non-tax revenue 3.1, capital income 1.2 lakh crores. Total expenditure is 27.86. There is a deficit of 7.04 lakh crores. Now, I'm suggesting, can we not increase our income by 5 lakhs through QCBs, quasi-currency bonds, and use that money in core sector projects to build up employment opportunities quickly? One can be rural roads. Another quick employment raiser can be in agricultural projects, irrigation projects. We'll come to that one by one. How can we do this? That is, raise additional funds. One was, as I said in the beginning, the idea of monetizing idle wealth, as remains in Padmanabhaswamy Temple. They have 30,000 crore rupees worth of gold there, gold and diamonds and other things there. Rather, the diamonds have not been valued. Tirupati has a treasure worth much more, though people may not admit it. One person who actually saw it in an underground cellar, from what he described, I think it must be worth around 3 times that Travancore Temple has. And we have around 25,000 to 30,000 tons of gold in the country in the hands of course, RBI, 687 tons, different old families, royal families, private citizens, of which only about 1,500 tons are now in this active economic stream through gold loans with banks or NBFCs. The rest is practically idle. Typically, a person, especially ladies, might use 1 or 2 or 3 sovereigns of gold daily basis. There are families, most well-to-do families have 50 or 100 sovereigns of gold in their homes, of which, let's say, 40 or 80 may be idle. And many of those ornaments may not be worn at least once a year or for several years. So overall, there are trillions of gold, trillions of dollars of gold in the country, which are an idle economic asset. How can we bring that into the national economic mainstream? In the case of temple assets, the target is not only to bring them into the mainstream, but to preserve them as it is, where it is, in the same ownership, without changing its use, without jeopardizing it legally, financially, physically in any way. That is a system designed for Padmanabhaswamy Temple. The quasi-currency bonds can do that. Now, some people ask me, why not take from churches? This is the second question I have faced. The first question is, wherever I have attempted to present this, why does a Christian involved in this? I'm a Christian Hindu. I belong to a family which has had a 500-year-old relation with the Sri Padmanabhaswamy Temple. We think like every citizen, every Hindu citizen of this country. We think for India. Second question is, why not take from churches? There is no taking here. It remains as it is. Instead, my suggestion is to give to certain selected temples the power to print currency of their own, which of course will be processed, executed by RBI upon directions from the government of India. We will go through that mechanism one by one. And for common people who have eligible assets, not all assets can be brought into the system. There has to be certain norms for becoming eligible. For common people and maybe corporates who have eligible assets, we can set up a company like the Stockholding Corporation of India, where they will demat this and produce a document which can be used for the quasi-currency bond. This is a question I told you I had to face. By the way, both these books are available on Amazon. You can download it on Kindle or on Kindle app. Kindle app is free. Please read it, comment on it. Okay, now we'll come to our topic. Apart from temples, the second method, as we have mentioned, is deficit financing without causing price rise and without causing decline in external rupee value. It's a known fact, accepted economic theory, that deficit financing devalues the rupee to a certain extent. It causes inflation. It has its attendant risks. Now, if deficit financing is the answer for the present economic crisis, all that the government needs to do is just add on, instead of 7, add on 14 lakhs deficit finance, take loans, that is, issue bonds and get money, and do whatever is required. Why is not the government doing it? There are things we can do. If deficit financing will answer that need, government could have done it. Government cannot do it because of inflation, devaluation of the rupee. There are external and internal financial risks because of that. So, quasi-currency bonds proposes deficit financing through targeted lending programs involving banks and NBFCs. Unlike in the conventional deficit financing program, this money that is raised through quasi-currency bonds is deployed into the market only through certain channels, certain limited channels, which will ensure that the maximum impact happens in terms of job creation and revenue creation. That's the last line. We do not print currency. For example, in addition to the 7 lakhs deficit budget, 7 lakh crore deficit budget, supposing we add 10 lakh crores allocated indirectly to infra projects from quasi-currency bond funds. Government issues or rather prints these bonds, let us say 100 crores each. Each of these bonds can be deposited in a bank where the Government of India will be a depositor earning an interest rate of 1% or 0.5% or 2% as the government may fix. The banks give so supposing one bank has got 1,000 crore QCB deposits. It gives hands over the bonds to RBI. RBI credits that bank's account with that amount. This amount is not subject to CRR and SLR conditions because it does not suffer from the withdrawal risk that common current account and savings bank account monies do. Therefore, all of that money is lendable. Now, to whom can that money be lent? The Government of India has to form a specific policy for that, including interest rates and security norms. We used to have this priority sector loans very effectively some time back. Now it is still active, but not to the same extent of effectiveness as earlier. Government of India can revitalize that priority sector plan, liberalize lending to agriculture, education, science and technology, R&D, irrigation development, infrastructure development and all that. And this money can be used to finance individuals and corporates engaging in these sectors. Because the government itself will not be able to achieve quick deployment of these funds to execute projects and get quick results. So I'll just read through. Banks lend to promoters of infra projects against security of project assets and collaterals according to policy. That is very important. The project by itself has to be sound on the basis of securities to the lending bank. The bank should take securities as being taken now. There will be primary securities, collateral securities, guarantees, whatever there is. Because the money is from quasi-currency funds, lending norms should not be diluted. But there is a very important change from the normal lending. Since the deposits carry only 0.5% or 1% or 2% interest, banks can lend it with a spread of just 2 or 3% and lend, let's say, 4%, less than 5%, for longer terms. So 20 years, 30 years. Now, the NPA level in banks for infrastructure loans is very high because the cost of funds is high comparatively compared to the period in which the money is expected to come back. From a road project or a bridge project or a dam project, the money might come back, the invested money might come back only about 30 years. Bank will ask the lender or borrower to repay that money fully in about 10 years' time or 12 years' time, and at interest cost of 8 or 8.5 or 9%. This lending is not actually suitable for infra projects. Therefore, this particular mode of lending, in which the interest rate will be less than 5%, and the period can be as high as 20 or 30 years as the Government of India decides, that will make any infra project financially viable And this money can also be used to refinance the existing infra projects which are NPA and lying incomplete, tying up lakhs of crores of funds belonging to the public. Now, quasi-currency bonds are raised without cash. Government does not.
What exactly is a QC?
Quasi-currency bond in the sense that this is currency, but it can be used only for certain limited purposes. Quasi, that's the reason why I said quasi.
Issued by?
By Reserve Bank on behalf of the Government of India, if it is for the government's budget. On behalf of the temple, if it is for the temple. And this limited purpose is only to open a deposit in a bank, a fixed deposit or a savings bank account or whatever. It has to be a fixed deposit because it cannot be operated by check. Now, how can the projects worth 10 crore lakhs be funded without printing currency? Because the answer is because we do not need cash always. Most of the expenditure is made through credit. I've explained it here. Project payments to be made via bank transfers drawing from loan accounts. Now there will be a certain amount of cash payments that can be met by increasing the money supply marginally, what is known as M3, That's all going into details. We know that the economy of around $2,500 billion runs on cash worth $250 billion. That's the cash reserve we have, say 10%. So we can keep adding to the cash marginally as the economy grows to meet cash needs, which will be very nominal. I told you about the interest rate banks, which are 5% or less, diminishing. Owner of quasi-currency bonds to receive interest for deposits, ensuring suitable spread for banks. Coming back to the temple and rich families, the interest provided for deposits will be an attraction for quasi-currency bonds from select temples and from general public via central asset holding entity. One of the proposals that the government of India brought forth to capitalize on the gold that we have is the gold bond scheme. Ornaments will not be accepted in the gold bond scheme. They have to be converted into standard gold. Normally, about 1/3 of the value of an ornament will be lost when it is converted into standard gold. Therefore, when gold bonds offer interest rates of 2% or 3%, there will not be any takers. I had predicted this 6 years back, and the results have been so far not more than 6,000 crore rupees have come into that over the past 6 or 7 years. If we offer this quasi-currency bonds as an investment alternative to the gold bond, we can raise about 10 to 15 lakh crores from those idle 25,000 tons of gold. Where does the money come from? This is something we touched on earlier. Can things be done without money? Yes, money is there. It is in the form of credit coming from RBI. Government directs RBI to give that much money as is deposited by quasi-currency bonds. Money comes from RBI. Without cash deposits, that's a question. We mentioned it. $250 billion cash serves $2,500 billion economy. Cash has to be printed only to meet incremental needs, say 8% of periodic addition to GDP. RBI does not print cash. Instead, it prints credit. Rather, it prints guarantee. What makes it different from conventional deficit financing? The lending, or rather investing and or it is lending or investing, is targeted at core sectors according to the credit policy to be formed by government. Making available very low cost and very long-term funds to private sector as well as public sector to finance projects. Government's usual deficit financing will not provide funds to the private sector, which is more active and more capable of producing results. And deficit financing, the usual one, will not be able to finance equity. It usually invariably goes into debt. Why private sector? To accelerate deployment of funds via multiple projects for quick employment generation, to complement public sector capacities, to leverage available funds and take up commercial ventures so that impact can be maximized. Quick results, the avenues for deployment of funds raised from QCBs is one is rural roads, check dams, minor irrigation projects. These can be conceived and executed quickly. Agri-produce godowns, cold storages, reclamation, reorientation of ponds and lakes in rural areas, micro water supply projects in rural areas, mini micro power projects, rural, urban, low-income housing. It can be done through both government and public sector as well as private sector, utilizing from the public sector and government, utilizing the local self-help government groups, MNREGA, MNREGA. UVA and Sparkle are two proposals I've given to the Government of India to tackle the issues of talent development and water shortage. The availability of water is a very important constituent in improving standard of living. We'll come to that. I'll come to that later. Longer-term projects we can do at ports and airports, highways, our own internet portals, operating system, database, search engine, security software. Even our defense equipment are actually, in a way, compromised by the source of the software, which is, say, for example, if you buy a Boeing airplane, the software is designed by them. Ultimately, they have the password and the controls. So, I've proposed to the Government of India that we should have entire ecosystem, internet and data system of our own. We can raise the funds required for that through quasi-currency bonds. India's own totally independent defense software, telecom, via public, private and joint sectors. Another set of long-term projects is this: irrigation dams and canals, agri-produce storage processing parks, wind, sea, hydro power generation, water desalination plants, food storage, seed production. These are all crucial areas where our agriculture sector needs support to sustain profitably and improve productivity. We know that about 33% of our food production is wasted due to insufficient handling and storage and processing facilities. All that can be rectified. Seed production, job parks, industrial estates, R&D, higher education, healthcare, via public, private and joint sectors. One of the important reasons for our slowness in coming out of the economic, this thing. Now we had this demonetization, which was a very strategic and important necessity due to various reasons, which we need not describe here. But it left a lot of hardship by removing the informal market that rural areas survived on. Now they're all compelled to come into the GST system to prosecute their business. For the illiterate, comparatively weaker rural trader, the taxman is an enemy, is somebody he is afraid of. So one of the reasons, one of the steps you have to take to achieve quick economic growth is to remove the fear. That's what I have addressed here. The entropy within GST and income tax systems also. If you remove that, entropy is that character within a system which makes it produce less result than it is capable of. There is entropy within our income tax and GST systems. Remove ignorance of the illiterate, unfamiliarity of the small taxpayer, fear of all taxpayer. Transform taxman from faceless wall into helpful friend. Now, does the income tax man have the time to do all that? He may not have. I have another solution. Remove entropy within the banking system, transform banking from an avenue of profit for capital into a profit-making national service, an extension of government's role to pool and distribute resources efficiently, identifying good borrowers, identifying good projects at local level. Now, since being a corporate consultant, I've come across this situation even in the case of medium-scale or large-scale borrowers. In one case, if a company has a bad CIBIL rating, all their financial transactions are pakka. They closed a loan in a nationalized bank months back, but still it is remaining on their CIBIL record as defaulted. We send notices to CIBIL, we send notices to the concerned bank, we send notices to the ombudsman. Nothing has happened so far. So much so that a project that they have approached the bank again for funds is hanging fire. Months and months. So, let's say 100 employment opportunities are being deferred till the CIBIL record comes right. That is one aspect. Another aspect is institutional. How to solve that is an issue. Because of so many loans becoming NPAs and government initiating stringent action against the officers concerned, people are now afraid to take up loans. One man said, I don't need to do anything, I'll get my salary. It is better for me not to do anything. So these kind of entropies have to be removed to accelerate employment. To accelerate projects which generate employment. So it's not only in the case of the bank employee that the entropy rests. It also rests with the borrowers who may not be familiar with the banking procedures, who may not know how to apply for a bank loan in the rural areas where we need more initiative in economic development. Another method for, another direction for reducing entropy is reducing NPAs. As and when a borrower enterprise shows signs of impending sickness, incipient sickness, there may be another bigger enterprise in the same sector who will be interested in buying this up, and the NPA borrower himself might be interested in selling out. Banks do not have a system of connecting the two, whereby business will grow, bank will be better off by avoiding an NPA. There has to be a national system for that. Either the IBA or the finance department or RBI has to think of that. QCBs can finance all these transformations by providing funds which are low cost and long term. Now, the two transformations that I spoke of through the Yuva and Sparkle programs. One is about water availability, one is about youth development. My suggestion to the government is to recruit young men immediately after college or +2, give them training using retired military people and other services people in personality development, physical health conditioning, in interacting with others, understanding national issues, helping rural people overcome that. The model I have in mind is, or rather what made me think of it, is the Peace Corps movement initiated by President Kennedy in 1961 or 62. What they did was to send out teams of 2 or 3 or 4 people to villages in third world countries for rural development, that was what they said. They had other intentions. Theirs was, political manipulation, control, spying. There will be so many objectives. So let us forget all that. But we can use that as a model. Send these people, youngsters, between the ages of 18 to 25, to rural areas. So we can think of recruiting 2 million of them because so much candidates are available. Some time back, there was a study by the CII and the Ministry of HRD, which identified that, I'm sad to say, 75% of all graduates are unemployable. Maybe you're all familiar with that. And 85% of all engineering graduates are also unemployable. Even when there is subject knowledge, there's a lot of other deficiencies which make them unemployable. These deficiencies have to be addressed if the nation is to prosper. And this YUVA program can bring all of them together who have not already been appointed into the government service or not been appointed into a bank or in a teaching job. There will be lakhs and lakhs of them produced each year. We know about 20 million people come out of the educational system every year and enter the job market. And many of them do not find employment for lack of opportunity as well as for lack of quality. Group them all together, send them out give them training, send them out into the rural areas where they will grow up, they will benefit. And the rural areas where they serve, they can advise the people there in improving agriculture, dealing with banks, dealing with the tax people, in primary education. There are so many avenues they can interact. They can also be provided refresher trainings, maybe 2 weeks every 6 months or things like that, all to be carefully planned out. These people will be transformed into competent adults who will contribute positively to the national well-being. And one of them can influence 10 of their friends. Each one can influence 10 of their friends. The whole country will benefit. This can be a revolution, a non-violent model of the Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong introduced a program in the mid-60s, Revolutionary Guards or something like that. And they did a lot of things for China which is directly harmful, but it shook China up out of a lethargy into, I think that is a starting point of their movement into the 21st century. But ours can be very peaceful, enlightened version of that. Sparkle, I think, is an idea that is now being implemented by the RSS through the One Well, One Temple, One Burial Ground program. My suggestion was to clean up all village ponds, make their, or rather increase or augment their storage capacity by providing PVC lining, minimize evaporation loss by greenery around, by using water hyacinth, even polythene covering. That is one aspect. A second aspect was modify the user pattern. I've seen a pond, a large pond in which a housewife is drawing water to cook, another housewife is bathing her children, a third user, a man, is washing his cow, and a fourth was a gentleman washing his bottom, all in the same pond. So my suggestion is to stop all such invasive use of the pond, as we heard in the previous speech, through local management policies, through local management committees. Build bathing huts alongside each pond. Avoid invasive use. Provide space for washing clothes, for washing animals, or washing vehicles, for personal bathing, all that. There has to be, if possible, I doubt it if it will be possible fully from the beginning, each and every community, each and every person should have the eligibility to use that. But immediately, in the immediate future, it will meet with a lot of resistance. How far the RSS one well, one burial ground, one temple program is successful, I don't know. But it is moving forward, and this can also move forward. These two programs can be financed by funds raised through quasi-currency bonds. All this I'm talking about is, if the government is to adopt this method, what are the avenues it can use to deploy that funds for quick results? In economics, there's a saying, economists and economic students may have heard of helicopter money. This is not helicopter money, this is actually people's will. Of course, you know what I mean. Deployment issue and deployment of funds need to be more carefully crafted with insight and foresight. Thank you all for patient hearing, requesting all of you to push the massive chariot that is India forward, each one his bit. And this is one area where we can contribute positively. Now I'll come to answer this question.
Sir, thank you very much for this wonderful lecture. No one here has, I think, any problems with your identification of projects or the methodology which you have delineated for their application. But the basic question is of a temple property being taken over by the government, though you have said that it will not be touched, it will not be affected. But we know that how the Constitution of India, though it says as per Article 25 and 26, how it has been interpreted or misinterpreted over time. And in many states, the temple, the funds, even the hundi money is taken away by the government. And it is being utilized in unwanted projects by the so-called party people for their own benefit. How can the temple property of Padmanabha Swami or any other temple or any church or any mosque, why should it be taken over by the government at all? And how can we guarantee the safety and security of this, whatever are the
good question. Okay.
Of these funds,
very important.
Once it goes to the government hand?
Yeah, very important. First of all,
thank you.
First of all, personally, I've shifted focus from temple wealth to government raising QCBs through budget. Secondly, even if we talk of the temple wealth QCB program, what I have suggested to the government is to make it voluntary. It should be the discretion of the temple to participate in it or not, of each temple. Thirdly, this program will keep the temple wealth secure and safe. It will actually avoid the danger of political interference and misuse. How, I will explain to you. Government is not taking over the wealth. If, to use Padmanabha Swami as a temple, as an example, if we implement it there, the wealth remains where it is, in the same form as it is, in the same ownership as it is, even in the same use as it is being used now. Absolutely no change. Now, Padmanabha Swami temple has a wealth of 1,30,000 crore rupees. Reserve Bank, effectively, all that it does is give Padmanabha Swami temple a certificate to that effect. Okay. In batches of 100 crores. One piece of paper, 100 crores. Padmanabha Swami temple takes it to a bank, different banks. Say 10,000 crores into 13 banks, it deposits. Now, the bank has got nothing to do with that gold. I go and deposit, you go and deposit 1 lakh rupees in a bank. Bank has nothing on your assets. You're giving it money. Okay. Bank lends to borrowers based on these funds, QCB loans, or rather loans based on QCB. Now, If a loan goes bad, bank will not turn to its depositors and say, our loan has become NPA, irrecoverable, you are going to lose your deposit. It cannot say that. No bank says that. It is not in the law. Therefore, if the loans based on this go bad, the depositor is absolutely free, safe. At most, bank may say, we will not be able to give you interest anymore because the borrower is not giving us money. Okay, you give back my ECB, that is the deposit receipt, cancel it and give it back. This cancelled deposit receipt is given to RBI. The arrangement is stopped. The wealth remains where it is, as it is. Nothing happens to it, whatever. The wealth of temples, important temples, is part of the system. It will always be, there will be a sanctity attached to it which will prevent interference and misuse. Because the system demands that once it is tied to this, the 1 crore 30 lakh, 1 lakh 30 crore QCB is given to Padmanabha Swami Temple on the basis of this wealth, then it is the lookout of the Government of India and RBI and the temple to ensure that the wealth remains there. And the income that is received on this 3,000 or 3,500 crores in a year will enable the best world-class protection. Therefore, there will be no pilferage, no misuse. In fact, this is a way to protect the rights of the temples and make them the owners of their income, or rather the custodians of their own income, and prevent the state governments from interfering, misusing. That is my proposal.
Excuse me, sir. It's a very good idea, the QCBs, and I actually have two questions. One is, when you have approached the concerned ministry about this, what has the feedback been so far? Are they open to it? Is it something they think that can be done?
Okay.
That's one. The second one is actually an observation and a question, which is that Indians have a very emotional attachment with gold, as you're aware. And that's the reason why the gold bond scheme didn't sort of move. And I personally know this because I wanted to take it at the time. My mother dissuaded me. She said, it's not going to be safe. Because the general feeling of a citizen is not, he or she does not trust the government. So even with temples, it's the same thing. Temples are eventually run by individuals. A natural sort of mistrust with government is there all over the world. So then how do you think this sort of concept can, pass a test and be accepted? So two questions.
Okay.
One is, how has it been received so far? And secondly, how do
Okay. I can say that I have talked about it to almost everybody except Modi ji. I talked to the number two persons. I talked to political leaders. I talked to top executives in RBI. I talked to IAS people in Finance Ministry, IES people also. I talked to devotees. I talked to the royal family. In fact, I started after discussing with the two princesses. Everybody says it's good. But everybody is afraid. And that fear and reluctance was expressed by one person in this one question: who will build the cat?
Sorry, what's that? Who will?
Who will build the cat? It is good. It is good. But who will build the cat? And that cat is the fear that people have. Okay. Now, I told I conducted a workshop, or rather my friends conducted a workshop in May 2018. And the most serious discussion was about this particular topic, the reluctance, the two questions you have asked. And Ravilochanan Iyengar of Indic Collective, which is an associate of Srijan Foundation, he was there. Then two people from the Temple Protection Committee were there. They were very hostile to begin with. But towards the end, they became ardent supporters of the idea. And a unanimous resolution was passed supporting this, but keeping the temples out. The resolution is general. It does not say temple wealth. The general idea of monetizing idle wealth. We unanimously support, we recommend to President of India and Prime Minister, they printed it and sent it with their signatures. There are only 14 people and the discussion was very lively. It went on for 2 hours and 15 minutes. Okay. And the second part, it will be very much present just as it is now. You can go to the that equivalent of stockholding corporation, the common holding entity, which will have to have regional depots, collection centers and all that, or museums or whatever. Just give your receipt, take your money back, take your gold back. That's all. Because the volume, total volume is massive, you're going to take 50 sovereigns out, will have no impact on it.
Why it cannot be done against land owned by the church? Because like church owns so much, like 1 lakh acres of land.
Frankly, this is giving the power to print currency to temples.
Right.
And even though I'm a Christian, I don't want that power to be given to anybody other than certain select temples. There are so many risks in that.
We have to generate like liquidity for the economy. I think church owns almost 1 lakh acres of land, which will have something, let's say, thousands of crores of market value.
Yeah. So, to put it this way,
Or any other, like let's
Yeah.
say, boats and
yeah, to put it this way, I wouldn't like the church or any other community to have 1 lakh crore rupees in its hands to do what it wants to do with. You got the point? Interest income in itself will be in thousands of crores. This right can be given only to a few select temples. Have I convinced you?
Sir, I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
They may not be exactly related. See, sir, one of the ways you said is that this is going to bring in like supposedly 10 lakh crore rupees into the economy and the banking system, and then you can push it onwards. Now, the thing is, the SLR already is in the early 20s or to mid 20s. Why do I not? Because there's a series of questions I would like to ask. Why do we not just cut the SLR rate? And that itself releases money into the system, which can be onward transmitted to the borrowers who need the money. Now, that is one of the questions. The other thing is, if you are talking about money, that I take this and give you a certificate, you deposit it in a bank, you get 1, 2, 3%, whatever you get. Now, why do I not, as a temple, monetize my asset? Like in the Padmanabha Swami case, there are certain coins, etc., which have historical value. Let's exclude them. But there is simply just gold lying around. Why do I not monetize it? Use that money. As a normal depositor, I can get 6, 7, 8% in a bank, in a FD. Why should I be satisfied with 3%? Why should I not go monetize it, have a negotiation with a bank, get much more money for myself, and then use that? And also, with respect to the targeted lending program that you're talking about, we have had a history of that. The priority sector lending program has been a complete failure because many of the banks do not ever meet their targets and they end up buying NABARD bonds. So why do you think that this kind of targeted lending to whatever it may be for capital projects is going to work? Because if I am giving you money at 5% when corporates are generally borrowing at 10 to 12, why would I not just jack up the cost of my project, take all the money and use extra money and put it in the market, that like many prosperous farmers actually do with the money that they get under PSL schemes?
Okay. First of all, cutting SLR, the government or rather the RBI is doing its best. The SLR has certain obligations. It cannot be wished away. A certain minimum has to be kept, and the government is always reworking that minimum half a point up or half a point down, so that option is exhausted. Even if it is possible, the cost of that money when it is lent to an infrastructure company and the term that it can afford is still the same, 8 to 9% interest, maximum 10 or 12 years period. Quasi-currency bonds can give lower interest longer term. Okay, for the which will ensure the success of long-term infrastructure projects. Now, I myself worked in a bank from 1978 to 1985, which I suppose was a golden period of private sector lending. Whatever be my personal convictions on the ethical ground and all that, I believe one of the best things that happened to the Indian economy was the nationalization of banks in 1969. And its effect can be summed up in one single instance. Yavatmal in 1969 was a small village of 600 houses. By 1979, it was a big town because Syndicate Bank was asked to open a branch there. Formerly, a bank would go there and open a branch as and when it saw fit. It would be profitable. After nationalization, bank said, go there, open a branch. Reserve Bank said. Now, apart from the availability of banking services, expanding the availability of banking services all over India, nationalization also imposed priority sector lending. And just as happened in Yavatmal, it happened all across the country. In agriculture, small trading, small scale industry, transport, and small business. It cannot be denied. As I said in my, when I said earlier, it has lost some of its effectiveness now. It can be restored. And to prevent misuse, that's your core point. The government has to have a firm policy, and most of the funds will be diverted not into small projects, but in medium and large projects which need this kind of funds. Therefore, the number of accounts will be low and the monitoring can be stricter.
First of all, sir, I really like this scheme of yours, but I have a set of questions, but I'll ask a few of them only. The first thing is that you just mentioned that it will be the responsibility of RBI and the government that the temple assets are secure and nothing happens to them even in the case of crisis. But in theory, there has to be some physical asset that has to bear the risk if there are some certain crises, like in the case of, even in the case of gold in RBI, in some extreme cases of crisis. In theory, what will you demarcate as something to be bearing the risk if there is an extreme case?
One moment. I think I did not ask one part of your question, that is about selling the gold and depositing at 8% interest, etc. As I said earlier, the scheme is purely voluntary. A temple can or cannot participate. If and when it participates, it can choose to deposit what, or it can, what portion of its items or what part of its list it can give. Some it can sell, some it can keep forever. It's flexible and voluntary. It should be.
But really the question I think is why not go for a 6% and whatever, correct?
Yeah.
And why would you go for a 3%
Yeah.
in QC?
So since the scheme is voluntary, and some part of it can, if a temple joins, it can set apart some part of its wealth. That part, which is not involved in QCB, that part of gold it can decide to sell if it wants to.
As a follow-up, does it not bring out the major flaw that is the problem that is there in the Indian state? Like Tirupati, we all know has a lot of money lying around, but the TTD, that is the board, just keeps it lying around, and whatever money that they are making otherwise from interest or whatever, they are using it for whatever purposes that the government is telling them to do. Now, does this not feed into the question that why should not temples be independent and do whatever they want to do with the money that the devotees are giving? And where the deity itself is the owner of all the assets, I do not understand where the government came into the picture and started deciding where the money will go. Why not the board hire its own people who will just look after management of the funds that the devotees are giving? Like any big university in the United States has a endowment fund that it manages on its own and does whatever it wants to do with the money. Then why not the temples have that freedom and have to go for these kinds of schemes in the first place? Let me do whatever I want to do with my money.
Okay, that is an issue I cannot discuss. The right of temples to manage their own property and all. I am not able to comment on that. Personally, my preference would be that each temple should be able to manage its own affairs. Secondly, about managing the wealth it has. Whether it is in government hands, whether it is controlled by the government or in private hands, misuse and mismanagement and misappropriation cannot be wished away. It will happen. Thirdly, if such a scheme is in operation, there will be more accountability and more supervision. Therefore, temple wealth is likely to be safer. Fourth, take the case of Padmanabhaswamy temple. There is no way it can liquidate those assets because each gram of gold is worth there not 2,500 rupees but 25,000 rupees of its historic value, aesthetic value, sentimental value. Therefore, the only way it can earn money on that asset, right now, it is a liability because 40 crore rupees have to be spent at least to keep it safely. Where does that money come from? It does not have that money. The state government is giving that money. And the system, the security system is not really foolproof. If a foolproof system has to be made, I think it will cost about, annual cost will be about 300 crores. So right now it is a liability. We can convert it to an asset, gaining an income of 3,000 crores, leaving a surplus of 2,700 crores a year, which can be used for good things. I forgot your question.
I was asking, on paper, what will be the thing that will have to bear the risk if there is some extreme case of crisis?
There will be no risk on the temple. I'm again illustrating with the case of Padmanabhaswamy temple. Let's say the economy crashes. All this paper is torn up. Padmanabhaswamy remains like this. That's all. He has his gold, it remains there. And in this, I have a part answer to your question about universities and all. There's a principle of trust. The temple trustees are actually trustees on behalf of the deity. And the deity is legally a minor. Anyway, he cannot do things for himself. A trustee's paramount responsibility is to put the trust assets to best use. That cannot be denied.
And in case of private parties who are actually who we are selecting to release these bonds, how will they cover the risk? Because in case of temple, we can have this thing that the temple asset will not be put at risk. But in case of private parties, there has to be something.
You see, we deposit money in banks. Okay. Now NPS occur. Banks capital erodes. Nobody says we will not return deposits. Deposits are safe, supposed to be safe.
Only up to 1 lakh.
Only up to 1 lakh. But that is the legal. Even otherwise, practically, a depositor's money, the moment bank says is not safe, deposits will not come. Therefore, the theory...
Many depositors were caught in this bank.
PMC, that's a entirely different thing. That's an entirely different thing. It's a crime. It's just like robbers breaking into your home and running away with crores of... if you keep crores at home.
That's what the borrowers have become. There are so many MPAs already in the bank. Why do you want to give them more money? Malia is one example. You get a list of lakhs of crores of MPAs. All the people have taken political clout and taken money from the banks. And they're all NPAs. So you say that temple money will go back to the temple. Yeah. But what about, where will the bank finance the money? The government is giving them now. They are printing currency or whatever they are doing. How are they financing? It's our depositors' money which the bank lends to people. So when all these MPAs are there, where does the money come from?
Now, NPAs are right now about 6%.
Lakhs and crores.
6% of the total banking funds. Let us look at the 94%. That works well.
I don't think these figures are unofficial figures are very high.
Even if we accept that the figures are fudged, it cannot be as high as China's was about 10 years back. It was 50%. Ours is maybe...
I'm sorry to say you're talking of roads and development. It's perfect. It's very ideal in a perfect world. But India, there is so much corruption. You will get horrible roads in 3 months. They are corroded.
Ma'am.
What is the use?
Ma'am, we have to transform India.
Yes.
And Modi ji has been doing that over the past 6 years, and there is much more to be done.
The roads are still getting corroded. In our area, in 3 months, they get destroyed. till today.
Yes, but we need to change, we need to improve, and we have to think of different ways to doing that.
I'm asking, in 2000, a year before this election, when there was no confidence motion from N. Chandrababu Naidu, Modi himself declared that NPAs were not 38%, it was 82%. And you are saying today it is 6%.
I have not heard of that 82%
No,
mention from Modi ji so far.
it was very clear statement in the Lok Sabha that NPAs in 2014 were not 37% or 38%, it was 82%. And when
2014.
government was asked to bring the white paper, Modi said, if I would have bought that white paper, then all the FDIs and everybody would have run away from here.
Okay.
So 6% figure today is very unrealistic. It is.
Okay. The official figures that came out, the maximum was 12%. And almost half of it has been recovered. That is my understanding. Even the official figures of 12% may have been fudged a bit. It could have been 18 or 20%. Possible. But there is always the green part of it. The drying part will dry out. The green part will have new shoots. We have to think of improving ourselves, think of a brighter future, not rest on, good people rest on past laurels. We rest on past misery. Let us not do that.
And my question is when you are talking about Padmanabha Swami temple, why we should exclude churches with the real estate they're holding?
Okay.
How can we say, it is great on your part to say that we don't want this thing to be in other community.
Okay.
But the question will definitely come, why we cannot be trusted?
Let me answer that. Let me answer that. So part of the reason, this is on record, I cannot avoid it. It will not be safe for the certain communities to have this money, this additional income. That is one fact. For certain communities to have this additional income, which can be in thousands of crores, it is not safe. That is point number one. Two, there is an economic theory behind it. Land is a basic economic resource. We are thinking of monetizing savings. Gold, which has come to Sri Padmanabha Swami temple or in our homes, is savings, which remain idle. Savings is capital. Capital cannot be made idle. So the entire proposition is about activating idle capital. Land does not fall into that economic classification. Third thing, if Parliament decides churches also should participate in it, I have no argument against that. It is for the Parliament to decide.
But sir, is it also because that churches have a central control from Rome, and if they have this authority to print money and get an interest for that, I think it might be a little politically incorrect, but is it also one of these reasons?
I have absolutely not thought of that. First. Second, I was a Finance Council member of our Archdiocese for 3 terms. And I am very much against the present policies. And I am one who argues that the control of the property should be taken away from whoever it is with now and given to the people. So, this particular aspect is not an element in this at all.
So I had 2 questions. One of the questions was related to what he just asked. Why do you want to exempt other religions? And you do say that it's dangerous if that kind of money comes in. But the spin-off to that question is then churches, mosques are not really involved in nation building. Are they really buying any bonds? Is there involvement? Because the plan you have with QCBs is that the funds will be deployed in national projects, whether it is roadways, ports, whatever. So how are then minority religions? They are not participating. They control their wealth. They've got everything. Government can't touch any of their wealth, unlike Hindus. So this is linked to the Freer Temples movement, basically, which we want. So is it going to disadvantage the Hindu temple? You say no, but that's one question. Second question is actually something which is more timely. Your scheme actually has value, this I believe, is because the current government has a lot of trust among people. If we have to hark back to the UPA 1 and 2 eras, and the kind of corruption that we people saw. There is no trust. So if there is a government change, and we hope not, but this is a democracy. If something happens, then this kind of control with this kind of huge portion of wealth, how can it be saved? Because they were playing around with the banks, and that's how we saw the scams, forcing those loans which were not productive. So how then can...
In the case of temples, the big temples, the asset remains where it is as it is, in their control. Therefore, if the political situation changes and the temple, Padmanabhaswamy temple or Tirupati temple feels that it is not, they don't want to participate in it, they can just withdraw. All these factors have to be considered by Parliament, discussed and incorporated into an act. We should protect the temples, we should protect the public, we should protect all institutions. And the first question, there's a word, category, somebody denied that categorically. Often it is a misuse. Most people, when they deny something, the press says they denied it categorically, but there may not be any category in it. Category, you know the meaning of the word? You know the meaning of the word? Category, deny with accusations. Okay. Now, don't take me badly. Please treat it in good spirit. If Padmanabhaswamy temple's gold had actually come into the churches of Kerala, there would have been so many more colleges and hospitals and whatnot. So, I cannot answer for Muslim community. I can answer for the Syrian Catholic community of which I am a part. We are actually very much part of this nation, and we do the very best in nation building. We involve in it very actively.
And like how? I mean, through bonds, or that's what I know.
Not through bonds. We spend our money in developing the nation through establishing colleges, schools.
But those are all counted as non-profit, and there are benefits which come in there. What I'm saying is the general perception is that minority religions, especially Muslims and Christians, I'm being very frank here, sir, because you are being frank yourself, are not really involved in nation building. So we have one more sort of, movement like this.
Okay.
And again, like you said, then it comes into, and I understand what you mean when you said if churches are going to put that money, they're going to get so many thousands of crores, and that's not good, you say. Now, if I could ask you again, sir, why is it not good? Do you feel that then they will more conversion?
Yeah. I did not say church. I did say certain communities who are, I don't want to reveal my personal feelings. Okay. Now, talking about church, when the word church is used, usually it is supposed to indicate the Catholic Church, which forms about 50 or 60% of the Christian population in the world. But there are about 44,000 churches now, other than the Catholic Church, and each of them is a small-scale industry which manufactures souls, manufactures salvation. For a fee, they get when I was in bank, I have seen this, dollar checks coming, every day 5 or 10 checks come, lakhs and lakhs of rupees. I'm talking about 1979, lakhs and lakhs of rupees. And every 25th to 30th, the one man's duty in that branch, where I went to supervise for 1 month, is to send out mail orders, mail transfers to about 400 plus pastors in various parts of the country. And as our earlier speaker said, even subnational identities being created and promoted, like Tamil, Sikh, Khalistani, these are all mischief making. These are all mischief making. Therefore, confine our present proposal to the most loyal and the most rightful, the temples. One more thing. Nation building is not merely buying bonds. Nation building can be done, the same effect as buying bonds can be done by depositing money in banks. Yes, we have money in banks, but not much. Why? Because this money that we receive is being sent out not to pastors. I'm speaking of my community, not to pastors to convert, but as hospitals, schools, which do not bring benefit. We actually, after all this, we keep paying out of our pocket, every household. The prior vicar says, yeah, this is your allocation this month or this year, you have to bring so much money. And how does it go out? I once sat before our vicar discussing something. His left drawer was open. I spent about 1 hour there. And during our discussion, several people came. They would engage him only for 1 or 2 minutes. Some people gave him money. He put in this is half open. He put in this drawer. Some people wanted money for a hospital expense, for paying fee to a child. So this is coming in, going out, coming in, going out. I was very proud of that. That's me. That's the way we use money. If you search for such a treasure, it will not be there in any church, because our treasure are our people, and our schools and hospitals and our orphanages build people.
During this discourse, I personally am not being concerned about your religious background or anything. I'm just looking at this scheme as something that we can utilize for nation building, and not something coming from a Christian person who is a practicing Christian. Just that these questions are actually very pertinent, and we are really very concerned about everything that says the government is having all the control on temples. But again, this comes back to the same question: who will represent the temples? We have to come back to the same question that first we need to free the temples and let them have their own choice if they want to come into this scheme or not.
It's voluntary. It should be voluntary.
But they are not free right now, sir.
Pardon?
They cannot make their own decisions right now, because TTD or Padmanabh Swami Temple or even Sabrimala in this case, Sabrimala board has actually acted absolutely against their devotees because it's government control.
Now we have a parliament that can set things right. This thing has to be taken up by parliament.
But only after temples are free, this absolutely, beautiful scheme can be implemented.
Temples will cooperate. Administrative committee members, everybody says it's good.
Even this is a lot of Hindus say this, that a lot of money is lying in a temple and not being utilized. But although they do not understand the intricacies behind all this system and how much is the risk behind that, so that's why all people are so concerned if this scheme will actually work or not. This is the only concern people have here. And also, are you going to include Gurudwaras as well in this, or they do not have enough of idle money that could be?
Gurudwaras are included.
Okay.
Yeah, they should be included. Thank you very much.